Welcome everyone to our 44th Web Debate, the last one for this year. And today we meet to discuss the topic diplomacy in times of COVID-19, and we focus particularly on the experience of developing countries. My name is Katharina Höhne, I'm the Director of Research at DiploFoundation, and I have the pleasure to moderate this debate. So this year has posed a tremendous challenge to diplomats. The impact of COVID-19 is felt in almost all areas of international relations. At the same time, there was a challenge to the conduct of diplomacy, to how diplomats work. And it's particularly in light of lockdowns and social distancing, diplomats had to adapt the way they worked and had to face a number of challenges in doing that. For example, how to pursue negotiations in times of social distancing. So this last month of the year, I think, is a good opportunity to look back at what happened, but also to use this as an opportunity to look ahead towards next year and even beyond that. So before we get into the debate and before we start listening to the experience of the practitioners and the experts we invited to today's debate, let me quickly give you the context for this debate. So as every month, this debate takes place in the context of the International Forum on Diplomatic Training, where we meet to discuss key topics in diplomacy and key issues regarding the practice of diplomacy. And the second reason, or the second element that we're building on today is a study that we conducted at DiploFoundation on the impact of COVID-19 on multilateral diplomacy. And while we published this a month ago, and it is clear that one study cannot give all the answers. So in a sense, we use this debate to continue the conversation. For the study, we were supported by the Finnish Ministry for Foreign Affairs. And as we continue the conversation, they are again supporting us. And this is why I would like to hand over the floor for some opening remarks by Ambassador Mia Reiner, who is the Deputy Permanent Representative of Finland to the United Nations in New York. Over to you.
Thank you, and good morning, dear colleagues from New York. It is my pleasure to be part of this virtual gathering today. And let me start by saying that from the Finnish perspective, the DiploFoundation study about future of multilateral diplomacy and COVID-19 that was launched last month, like Katharina just said, was an important milestone, and it does merit this kind of follow-up event that we're having today. So I wish to thank Diplo and especially Ms. Katharina Höhne for organizing this. As we have seen, the virus has managed to make us very humble, and that we have to respond by finding an ability to learn, to adapt and innovate, both as diplomats as well as human beings. When we entered into this project with Diplo last spring, we knew still relatively little about COVID-19 virus. But what we did acknowledge was the concern for leaving no one behind, as we say in the language of Agenda 2030. In Finland, our government program gave us firm guidance. The program is titled Inclusive and Competent Finland, and this is what we tried to do. In practice, our approach was and still is that also multilateralism can be made more inclusive and competent. Having said this, I wish to mention the help desk function for developing countries that is part of this project. Equal opportunities for participation or equal access to digital environments and platforms are not just issues of fairness, but they are human rights issues. And in addition, I'd like to mention the role of civil society that can never be overemphasized, I guess. So I'm very eager to take part in this discussion of what we have learned as practitioners in the field of multilateral diplomacy, and with special emphasis on small and developing countries. By now, we have all learned about multiple digital platforms, variable protocols, accidentally unturned microphones, digital safety, online communication, and occasional overdoses of webinars, postponed meetings, and so on. But still, our perspectives are bound to be various and very different from each other. And of course, nothing compensates in-person meetings and confidential face-to-face discussions. But we can surely still find something positive and potentially very useful in our new social and technical innovations. In Finland, for example, we'd had our first ever digital ambassadorial conference in August, and it was a major gathering, but completely in a virtual format. Let me conclude by saying that also our previous cooperation with Diplo on big data and artificial intelligence and diplomacy highlighted how important collective learning and sharing of experiences really is. And that is what we are here for mutual learning. So I really look forward to the discussions today, and thank you all.
Thank you so much. So this basically gives me the opportunity to introduce our speakers for today. And as you know, any debate is just as good as its speakers. And I think we truly have an excellent lineup for today. So let me introduce them. In alphabetical order, we have Ms. Asha de Sousa, who is Second Secretary at the Permanent Mission of St. Kitts and Nevis to the United Nations in New York. So she's also joining us from New York today. Then we have Ms. Marisela Munoz, who is Minister Counselor at the Permanent Mission of Costa Rica to the United Nations in Geneva. And then last but not least, we have Mr. Mokhtar Jadali, who is in charge of the Information Society Division within the Department of Infrastructure and Energy of the African Union Commission. So thank you so much for taking the time to join us. It's an absolute pleasure to see you. And it's a real pleasure to kind of span the globe, so to speak, with having all of you here together today. It's truly a great pleasure. Having said this, let me also remind you, our audience, that we're trying to make this debate as interactive as possible. This means we're looking for your questions and your comments, which you can post in the chat. And my colleague Marco Lotti will be looking after you in the chat, and we'll be collecting your questions and your comments, and then will help me bring these questions and comments back into the debate. So please don't hold back. We're looking forward to also entering into a conversation with you. But now, without further ado, I think it's time to bring our speakers into the discussion and to start by assessing what's been happening this year from their different perspectives. So the question I would like to pose to start with is basically if our speakers can summarize their experiences this year regarding the practice of diplomacy and the adaptations that they've seen or underwent in light of COVID-19. Basically, what has changed in terms of their work, and perhaps what were particular challenges. And I would like to ask Marisela, who is speaking to us from Geneva, to give us a first impression there. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Katharina. Good morning, good afternoon, or good night to our dear colleagues and participants today. I really would like to thank DiploFoundation and the Finnish government very sincerely for opening up this space to share experiences, as Her Excellency, the DPR from Finland was just mentioning, and to develop this collective learning experience all together. I think that the holidays is always a good time to make reflections. And in this case, we have learned so much through these challenging times. I think that, of course, the methods of work will be one of the major themes that we have tackled amidst the pandemic. As you have seen yourselves, we have experienced an increase and high dependency, I would say, on commercial virtual platforms to undertake our work. We have faced a lot of difficulties because of the restrictions imposed by the pandemic, vis-a-vis the face-to-face traditional encounters and meetings and gatherings that are so traditional in the diplomatic practice. And I think that we have to really analyze with greater depth what this means for the diplomatic practice. What is bringing about these new choices that we have created for ourselves. For instance, I have seen here in Geneva that depending on the type of meeting that we are trying to undertake, we have many choices. We can, for instance, go for a 100% virtual meeting. That is a meeting in which all participants are connecting through a platform. In the United Nations, we have used for official meetings the Interprofile, although it's not a customized platform for diplomats, but it has served its purpose. And the other type of meeting is the hybrid meeting. In this case, for example, one delegate per delegation is in the room, and the other delegates, experts, and civil society participants, for instance, are joining virtually. So this is the hybrid mode. And we have also used the silence procedure to make decisions in the United Nations system. So just to name a few, these are some of the modalities that we have, try and see how they can feed for the different sessions. For instance, in a negotiation or in a group of governmental experts, I would personally say that nothing substitutes the personal interaction, the coffee in the corridor, or even the body language reading that you make so as to prepare your position, your reactions. But there are other procedures that are much more square or that less sensitive, politically speaking. So in those cases, silence procedure or virtual gatherings have worked okay. But we have learned so much because, as the ambassador was also mentioning, we need to be mindful of inclusivity issues and to ensure that meaningful participation from all the stakeholders is guaranteed. And amidst the crisis brought about by the pandemic, some of the usual resources at our disposal are no longer there. Not only financial resources, but also human resources. And I think that we have also faced this difficulty of prioritizing our work and making sure that we work around different time zones, that we engage with the right participants, and at the end of the day, we can have everybody at the table. And we need to continue making sure that we learn from these experiences, what have worked and what have not, so that we can plan for the year ahead. This is what I would like to share for now. Thank you.
Thank you. That really is a great start into the discussion. And I think everyone can agree that nothing replaces face-to-face personal contacts. What I also find interesting that we now have, perhaps on the positive side, a greater palette of choice between virtual meetings, hybrid meetings, and in-person meetings. And perhaps this is something that is going to influence how diplomacy is practiced over the next years. But kind of sticking with this idea of sharing experiences on what happened this year and how you experience this from different perspectives as diplomats, I would like to turn to New York and to Asha for her to share her experiences from this year, how her work has adapted, what has changed, perhaps any challenges. Asha, over to you. Okay, so you can't unmute yourself. Try again. Can you say something?
Yes, okay, here I am. Wow, this is the perfect indicator of what COVID, the impact of COVID. I know in the GA hall, I would be looking for a light on the microphone, which I would have no control over, and I would trust the technicians in the DGACM and conference management to help me sort out that issue. But I'm left here to fend on my own, and I guess that's a great segue into capturing my experience. Before I go any further, though, of course, I have to say good morning, good evening, hello to everyone that has joined us, and a special hello to my neighbor, DPR from Finland. Good to see you, Excellency. And of course, I am happy to see again, Excellency Mariela from Costa Rica. Happy to see you, Dr. Katerina. I think, and of course, Mokta, I think it's good to meet us here again, and I have to thank the DiploFoundation and the government of Finland for providing us this opportunity. As I just started, I think COVID-19 has made a great impact on us all in more ways than we can actually fathom. It's been 8 months since the pandemic started, made landfall to our world, I guess, and we are still learning. We are still trying to adapt. I think for me, the most impactful elements are essentially that we were able to boost our productivity in New York, and I'm sure DPR from Finland can appreciate. We have been able now to work from home. We've been submerged in a virtual world, and so we can spend less time commuting. And for me personally, spend less hours getting ready. I'm sure some of us can relate to that. And we have seen, exponential increase in innovation and in our creativity. I have seen even at my ministry where we have been able to in a sense, initiate new meetings that we haven't heard of before, because the virtual platform has inspired us to do so. We were spread across all the different regions of the world, and our permanent secretary had the idea to allow us to meet on the virtual platform. Certainly, our Geneva colleagues would be much more familiar with this, but for some of the countries in the world and some of the ministries in the world, this was not necessarily a common practice. And so we look at the development of the pandemic in a more positive light. Certainly not to discount, as I would quote, some traumatic experiences that some of us have had. I mean, certainly we have been removed from our colleagues in a physical way. Some of us have had limited social reaction, and I hate to sound pessimistic, but some of us have been confined to social isolation. And that, of course, would have an impact on the overall development of and enjoyment of life of a person. Still, I prefer to focus on the more positive elements, and I think what we would see in the years ahead is the impact of COVID boosting our own creativity and our resilience and our ability to find creative and acceptable solutions for us all. So that's my key takeaway. As I approach the end of 2020, I have been doing some introspection for myself, and I think at the end of the year, hopefully, I'm going to keep my fingers crossed at this moment. Hopefully, I would be able to say that 2020, while it was rough, it was life-changing. It also had some very positive developments that if were not for COVID, we wouldn't have been able to see. So that's my perspective in a nutshell. I could go on and on, but I would also like to hear others, and would be happy to answer any questions that are coming after. Thank you so much, Katerina.
Thank you for joining us, and thank you for also bringing this positive spirit of innovation and creativity. Building on that, I would like to move to the seat of the African Union to kind of hear the perspective from there, and therefore ask Mokta to reflect on this year and your practice and what has changed, perhaps what has remained the same, and any challenges you would like to point to us for this initial introduction. So over to you, Mokta.
Thank you very much, Katrina, Excellencies, Marcella, Maya, Aisha. So good to have so many female names, and I'm the only male here. And it's really exciting. I mean, I have never been in such a how can I say, comfortable context in which, so unbalanced gender, if I may say. But it's really very appreciated, and I am very honored and humbled by being among you friends and sisters to provide my perspective from the African Union. And certainly whatever has been said before is applicable also to what had happened in the African Union context, in the sense that we have been, all of us, struck by the COVID-19. We were not prepared for it, and we had to really accept the technology in order to continue our business, which is our policy development process. In Africa, we have quite kind of experience. All our diplomats, like everybody everywhere else, is wanted that human touch, because in the African context, it's very seldom that we vote, and we strive for most of the time for the consensus, and consensus requires sometimes coffee break, required sometimes to go out, required to have talk in the corridors, which the technology has not allowed at that point of time. But nevertheless, we managed to really do continue our activities, diplomatic activities, in developing our policies. We held our regular meeting that the members, the diplomats, what we call the permanent representative committees, having regularly their meetings on a weekly basis. We had an executive council, which is actually the Council of Ministers of Foreign Affairs, online, and specifically we have the Africa-China Summit that was online. One of the things I just wanted to mention, which are specific to us, was the fact when we start choosing the digital platform was really one of the challenges. Which digital platform should we have to pick? That one was the first question. And specifically when we had to prepare that summit between Africa and China, the technology at that point of time was one of the things that we had to be questioned. And the second thing that we had the challenge is the interruption of internet, the internet shutdowns. At a specific period of time, we had an internet shutdown, and that was actually one of the worst experiences we had. So we had to go through satellite with a low connectivity, and all of us converging to the African Union headquarters, and from there try to do our business continuity. So the point is here, yes, our diplomats have becoming the early adapter of the technology, to the point that I think last year they wouldn't imagine anybody working out from home. To the next year, the budget planning is there is no traveling at all for the next year in 2021. Even if after the COVID-19, people start enjoying. The challenges that remain in front of us would be connectivity, of course, security and trust in the digital platform. And that is a thing that we all have to think together about it and see what kind of solution should be provided to have secure diplomatic process. Over to you.
Thank you so much for this overview. Lots of things to kind of pick up on. And what I noticed for now is the budget planning for next year, and that there's no travel foreseen, which is a very interesting choice with broad implications. And I think other people at other institutions might tell a very similar story in that regard. That actually brings me to the opportunity to kind of deepen our conversation a little bit more on these things. First of all, let me remind our audience, we're looking forward to your questions and comments, so please keep them coming in the chat. But for now, I'd like to kind of take my privilege as the chair, as the moderator, to ask some of the questions that that are kind of burning for me once we have our wonderful speakers here with us. So we already kind of heard this point about budgeting for next year. And perhaps with that and other points in mind, I would like to turn to Maricela in Geneva again. And my question for you is basically, how do you assess the impact of this year on the Geneva ecosystem, and basically looking ahead to next year, to 2021, especially from the perspective of small and developing countries. What do you foresee for 2021? What are your perhaps hopes and concerns, and what are the elements we can already kind of feel coming? What is your assessment?
Thank you, Katarina. I think that's an excellent question, and I am already learning so much from what I have hearing from my distinguished colleagues, and thinking ahead, because not only we are still facing lots of uncertainty with the COVID-19 pandemic, but we are also not sure if this will be the only dramatic challenge of this century, for instance. So in Geneva, we have experienced lots of cancellations and postponement of meetings. We are under a lot of pressure to deliver, of course, and we have been combining these different methods of work that I mentioned earlier with lots of innovation, as dear Asha was mentioning, that have, of course, require for all of us to learn new skills. And I think that in this case, DiploFoundation has an amazing job of also compiling what these skills mean, especially I'm talking about your study, Katarina. And so in thinking ahead and preparing for a very overloaded calendar, overpopulated calendar next year, I think that we cannot forget one of the elements that I keep hearing during these conversations and exchanges, and that's the development of trust. And trust is a scarce commodity nowadays, unfortunately, and we need to try to cultivate it and to protect it. And of course, trust is developed through personal interaction, especially in the room. So no matter where we come from, bigger or smaller delegations, developed or developing countries, we are all looking forward to resuming face-to-face meetings. This is what I keep hearing from my colleagues. So we're trying to plan ahead, making sure that we include in the UN budgets for conventions and other mechanisms that take place here in Geneva, a small component for hybrid meetings, with the hope that we won't need to use those funds or budgetary items, and that we will be able to resume our calendar, plus the meetings that were already canceled or postponed this year, including important meetings like review conferences and stuff like that. And so going back to trust, I think that we need, as Mokhtar was saying, be mindful that there are countries like in my region, in Latin America, that lack the digital skills, the connectivity, the steady electricity, and that are in different time zones as well. So when we plan ahead, if colleagues cannot travel to Geneva to participate meaningfully at these meetings, we need to make sure that at least they remain involved. And one positive experience that I take from this year was the realization of the Internet Governance Forum. That was the first time that it took place virtually. I just finished my term as a MAC member, multi-state advisory group member. And one of the lessons learned from this experience was that it is possible to engage a broader audience in any, virtual event, but that cannot replace the face-to-face event. So in the future, we need to make sure that if we resume face-to-face, gatherings and official meetings, we still try to include a broader audience, not only colleagues from our own countries, but civil society organizations, international institutions. The more the merrier, and the more inclusive also, the best. So I think that we are all trying to remain positive, looking at 2020. I feel that we're all a little bit tired of the challenges, but at the same time, very proud of ourselves because we were resilient and we were able to adapt our methods of work. And I consider that for next year, we will be able to continue undertaking our roles and our different commitments, with a better understanding of what not leaving anyone behind means. Thank you so much.
Thank you. That's also a very, very hopeful and positive note. I'm also hearing there's possibly a lot more work for next year, but perhaps also skills to tackle that. I would like to go to New York again, to Asha. And Asha, I would like to ask you also to reflect on what you are expecting for 2021. And I know your work focuses a lot on the third committee of the UN General Assembly. And perhaps if you can add some reflections in that regard, what you foresee as adaptations, what the prospect for 2021 is from your perspective, given your work there. Over to you, Asha.
Yes, thank you. Can you, or the informal statement, can you hear me? Oh, there we go. I don't think I'll ever get accustomed to that part. I want to endorse fully what Maricela has said, actually, and she touched a lot on how we are feeling. We are tired. I think I am tired. I think we have coined it now, seen the global trend to coin it COVID fatigue. And I think we are somewhere in the middle of trying to figure out, are we at the end? Are we at the middle? What is 2021 going to bring for us? As you may know, in New York, we are entering the second or the third wave of COVID. And we have seen, I think yesterday, they announced in New Jersey that there are going to be some new measures. And so we are still trying to figure out where we're at and how that would define our physical movement. I think, and if I can be a bit reflective, this session's third committee, the 75th session, it was, and without of course getting too technical, it was a bit more manageable. I think the time that I was able, for instance, to save on commuting and traveling and that time, about 3 hours a day, I could have dedicated to completing more of my task. And of course, some of our colleagues or different countries who would have understood the pandemic and decided to do what we call a technical rollovers for their resolutions, made the program of work a bit more manageable. Suffice to say, though, I think, like Maricela, a few of us are a bit excited to get back to the physical meetings and to get back to seeing each other, meeting each other face to face, and so that can make negotiations a bit more easy. Because of course, as many have said, there is no replacement for face-to-face negotiations. I think that at some point next year, and understanding, of course, that the third committee is one of the 6 committees here in the General Assembly. And so I don't want to say we're looking at each other, but I think there would be a more holistic approach to what we do in 2021. There are, of course, other commissions, the Commission on Social Development, the Commission on the Status of Women, the Commission on Population and Development, which are separate and apart from the committees. And I am actually not sure which direction we are going to go next year. I know in 2020, the pandemic had hit just as we were commemorating just as we had started to convene the 64th session of the Commission on the Status of Women, where we had the negotiations to commemorate to conclude political declaration on the Beijing platform of action. And that was somewhat disrupted. I don't know. I think, and I have to be honest here, colleagues, I'm not sure what the next year holds for us. I know we have assumed planning as if we were to restore some level of normalcy, but I hasten to ask, what is normalcy at this moment? I think there is somewhat of an uncertainty, and I'm not sure if I'm just being now a bit more pessimistic than most, but I'm not sure, honestly, what the rest of the year, well, next 2020 holds for us. I know, for instance, that we have the BBNJ conference. I also cover a few other issues at the UN. That is the conservation and sustainable use of marine biological resources beyond the areas of national jurisdiction. And we were slated to conclude that international legally binding instrument this year, and that meeting was postponed to 2021. And you would realize now, and I think Maricela alluded to it, that now we have a jam-packed agenda for 2021. But if you juxtapose that to the reduction in budgetary planning, what we have is a lot of I don't knows. I don't know if we will be able to achieve all of the work that we have postponed from 2021. And in addition to that budget, I don't know if we would be able to ensure equal participation, because of course, as Mokta quite alluded to, we have seen governments, well, he alluded to the budget implication of the African Union, but even my own government has already indicated that there are going to be some reductions in the expenditure that is allocated for travel, for instance, most importantly. And I'm not sure if that is as a result of the economic impact of the pandemic, or if it is as a result of opportunity to ensure that we can keep our citizens safe, or if it is as a result of both considerations. And I would be happy, of course, to hear from other colleagues, you know, what their own governments are doing in light of this. So I mean that's my outlook. As I mean, it is somewhat uncertain, and I apologize for that. I think perhaps my neighbor DPR from Finland can shed some light. I'm not sure what planning or PRs have been doing at that level. Of course, we, the experts, are more connected to the work, but the decision makers, I'm not sure what the decision makers, where their minds are at, because of course we take our instructions from them. I am not yet a decision maker, but let's see. And where we will go with 2021. I think, you know, our ears are still at the ground. I think we are waiting. We just need some time to recoup from 2020 and the what we have experienced, and then perhaps in January we may be a bit more excited to continue with the program of work. So that's my outlook, my perspective on that. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Asha, for sharing. And you mentioned the Finnish ambassador. Mia, would you like to come in with some reflections on what you expect for next year? How this presents itself from your perspective?
Thank you. I could say perhaps that we're doing a lot of double planning at the moment, just because we don't know what is coming, whether how much we will have the same as now, in a virtual format. Will we actually get our ministers here and back to normal? So I think this is the kind of planning we have to do, and it takes, of course, a lot more time to do everything twice, or actually in a three ways, in a completely virtual format. And then we're thinking if there's something we could do in a hybrid format, and then are we back to the normal, or the normal as we used to know it. So I think that is a challenge for us in a management level to try to figure out. And also because our capitals are in the same situation, that they need to, they don't know what is going on. So I think this is the uncertainty is a fact that we now just have to live with. And maybe I could also mention that what has been worry for us is the role of civil society, because we have observed that even if they are able to attend some of the meetings now, their ability to really sincerely participate is not as good as it used to be, and it's a lot of debates that we have to go through and through again, whether what is their role and how which organizations can be involved, and I think that is a pity, and we should really work hard to get them involved, and media probably as well, because I think I see their role changed a little bit as well, because we do need them as well. We're not in a bubble talking only to each other, but we need to be able to reach them too. So maybe this just to add.
Thank you so much. I think just reflecting on what you just said, uncertainty seems to be the word for 2021 in a lot of ways. And then I noticed also this double planning, so more efforts need to go into that. And then the question of participation, that's also a big one for us in the sense that How do you ensure equal participation in hybrid meetings? But then also, how do you bring civil society in a meaningful way in hybrid meetings, in online meetings? And we've seen different practices by different organizations, some more successful, some less successful. But sticking with this idea of, so what's going to happen next year? What's the outlook? I would like to turn again to Mokhtar and hear the perspective from the African Union. So we know that some meetings have been postponed to next year. So perhaps this also speaks to this jam-packed agenda that we might be facing in 2021. And then there's also the African Union Summit, which is scheduled for January. Perhaps with these things in mind and then broadening out there, what are your reflections, Mokhtar? Over to you.
Well, thank you very much again. Indeed, the African Union Summit is planned for January 2021, which is actually next month, and we don't know if we will be really, no decision has been made. Will it be physical or will it be online? We're still in the planning process. But let me just let you know that this summit is actually, unlike other summits, is very special in the sense that it is supposed to address the issue of the election of the leadership of the African Union Commission. If I had mentioned previously that in the African context, we barely vote, or we always go for the consensus, this time, because we are voting to elect the member, we need to vote. Will be that one pushing for a physical meeting? Maybe not, maybe yes. Will we be having an online and see what had, emulate what had happened in some of the international fora where the voting had happened online? How that will be happening, this is something that really we still discuss. You alluded to the fact that we have postponed a few meetings. Yes, one of the major actually summit we were supposed to have the EU-Africa, EU-AU summit that has been postponed for mid next year. It's a very important because the European Union is actually one of the major partners of the Africa. Now, my previous speakers have really provided a light on a lot of things that were supposed to happen in 2021. And let me just add something on top of that, which is, comme on dit, la cerise sur le gâteau, is the fact that no matter how the budget restriction will happen, this is a great opportunity for small countries who had small delegations and not many participants. This is a great opportunity for them to go to the hybrid meetings. You will have a small delegation going, but also supported from the headquarters by a bigger delegation that are participating, contribute, and hence for Africa that have been always absent because of the the small delegation they have had. This is the greatest opportunity for us. However, my personal experience, that what I have seen so far, that the meetings that were supposed to be held in 2 days is being held in 1 hour. And they have less speakers and less contributors. And well, you can say that is good because maybe it's an efficiency. Things that are happening, for instance, in 2 days are happening in 2 hours or in a few hours. But in the same time, I have noticed some discomfort because of the recordings of the meetings. At most of the time, people have the tendency to take more time to prepare, which is probably good or bad, and say a few things and not being very, very open as it should be in a normal setup whereby some agreement have been had outside of the meeting. That human touch, because diplomacy most of the time is based on secrecy, is based on negotiations. Most of the things that happening in the plenary is not really that has been happening. Decisions are happening mainly in the corridors, if I may say that. But you are more diplomatic than me, and you know exactly what happened. But my experience to that, I have seen decisions being adopted mainly after being negotiated outside of the meeting room and then coming back the religious to convert that. So that absence of corridor, the discussion, the secrecy of things, that whisper that is really was a key in terms of actionable diplomacy is actually missing. And hence, I see more, despite the whole budget limitation, which is not good actually for the air transport sector, by the way, in between bracket. It's one of the sector because, as you say, in economics, nothing is missing, everything is being transformed. If we lose somewhere, we win somewhere, and if we win somewhere, I believe that the first opportunity that will happen for people to start traveling and meeting, they will see that opportunity and come back to the old normal, if I may say. However, they will have learned from what had happened in 2020, and then the smaller countries, the smaller delegation will use the opportunity. Now, the challenge for those small delegation is not only participation, but also access to connectivity, to power, to devices back home to be able also to efficiently contribute. So we need to solve smaller problems before really trying to have a full adopted plans for future online diplomacy, if I may say, on how to address our diplomacy in the future. Over to you.
Thank you. It sounds like it's like a real 3D puzzle under quite some uncertainty of what's actually going to happen. And also this question, how do you mix these different meeting types that we now have potentially at our disposal? I mean, we always had them, but now they're much more in the forefront of our consciousness. I also note again the mentioning of trust. I think that's another important keyword that I kind of take from this conversation. But now I think I should stop talking and hand over to my colleague Marco Lotti, who has kept a very, very close eye on the chat and the comments and questions we received there. Marco, would you like to jump in and give us an impression of what's been happening there?
Yes, Katarina, with pleasure. As you said, I've followed the many threads that were mentioned in the chat, and I would like just to mention a few. We have a couple of comments and one request for clarification. First one comes from Lydia. She's saying that the majority of the speakers, after thanking them, of course, did mention innovation and creativity. So if they would be able to share specific innovations or specific projects that they have innovated during this precise time would be helpful. And the second comment is from Benson. He's saying that as far as for me, there has been an inadvertent adoption and adaptation of technologies within developing countries as a way to ensure business continuity. Ordinarily, this has not been so prior to the pandemic era. So to a certain extent, the usual technology phobia levels have seemed to be flattening up. And again, he's saying in a positive light. And then a last reaction from Ying Chu to Mokhtar's comments. He agrees that people negotiate important things and agreements outside the meeting, so there is something more than the meeting itself. These are just a few first reactions.
Thank you, Marco, for these impressions from the chat and the comments. What I would like to do is basically take all these questions and add one of my own, which is again on trust and how our excellent speakers, how you think trust, how trust can be fostered, especially in this online environment, because you all kind of alluded to that trust is quite important, but how can we actually build it, or how do you see it being developed or fostered or nurtured in this context? And it's going to be even more important, I think, going forward as we navigate these very different meeting spaces. So the questions and comments from the chat, and with my final question to you, I would like to hand over to one final round of comments and suggestions from our speakers. Again, I would like to start with Maricela to give us a final roundup and perhaps also some hope, if I may say so, for the future. Over to you, Maricela.
Thank you so much, Katarina. And it's so enriching to listen to the different questions and comments. Thank you for those reflections. I think that, of course, we need to be very conscious about the issue of trust and confidence building and to foster it because this is the diplomacy practice of the 21st century, one in which we will have to adapt new methods of work, as we have alluded to, and to make sure that we are inclusive enough and take into consideration not only software and hardware limitations, especially in the part of smaller delegations, but also what meaningful participation really means. You need to have the means to be in a virtual gathering, but you also have to have the skills and the space to contribute to the conversation. And I want to underscore the importance of civil society in that regard, because we have seen good examples in which they have been able to engage actively, but also we have had some cases in which that has not been the case. And I think we need to consider those cases very carefully in order to avoid that similar practices become a precedent in the future. I think that in the sense that innovation is, integrated to our daily activities, I have seen something of particular interest to me, and that's been the development of webinars with panels of experts, and also the increase in informal consultations. And before, Mokhtar alluded to the practice of consensual decision-making in diplomacy, and the identification of commonalities, so that the delegations that are steering processes or sharing certain conventions or meetings are able to understand what are the different perspectives and to find common ground, so as to be able at the end of the day to build successful outcomes. And I have seen that, especially in the disarmament and environmental agenda here in Geneva, we have used these tools, these webinars of experts, to increase exchange and for us to make informed decisions as we move the processes forward. We have also developed now, which I call my personal calendar for bilateral consultations. Before I needed to make sure that, during coffee breaks or, the moment you go out of the room just to stretch your legs, you interact with different colleagues, and you have like mental notes. Oh, let me not forget to speak to the European Union or to, Ethiopia, now that I am able to see my colleague right here in the corridor. But now I need to be much more disciplined about it. And I have my notes, so I prepare, bilateral consultations, in which, of course, it requires a lot more of time. I need to send an email or a WhatsApp and make sure that my colleague is going to be available for these informal exchanges. But those also are, characteristic, I would say, of this new environment. And finally, also the informal consultations, in which you engage all interested parties, like stakeholders, civil society organizations, think tanks, academic representative, and you make sure that you feel the temperature, and if there are aspects, divergence, points in which you know that you need to build further, understandings, then you focus on those as you move forward in certain processes that have undergo, a silence procedure modality, or that will hence be finalized in a hybrid session, for instance. You need to prepare that terrain. So all these innovations, I think that we need to take note of the successful experiences and make sure that we incorporate them into our work for next year. And I think there is hope. I think that we have learned a lot, and that we have been able to identify key factors like meaningful participation, the building of trust, the importance of personal interaction. And I think we will carry these lessons and reflections over into the next year. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So let me hand over to Asha for your reflections on the questions we had, and perhaps any final reflections you would like to share.
Sure. I think, yes, my mic is on. I wanted to just respond very briefly to the question. Well, firstly, to the question about innovation, and I think I alluded to, and perhaps I can give some more detail what our ministry has done, and it would have been the first time that we did this exercise to bring all of our ambassadors together with our diplomats, with our diplomats, yes, and our foreign service officers posted at Capital, or foreign minister, and we met over a series of weeks where we each mission had to report on what's happening in their jurisdiction, and we found that, especially for foreign service officers at Capital, they found that it was quite useful because, of course, under normal circumstances, that information would be shared only with the management, as Mia said, and would not necessarily be disseminated to all of the foreign service officers. So it bolstered in that way the creativity, because and perhaps I should even add inspired an inclusive approach, inclusive participation, because certainly while foreign service officers and other diplomats would not sit and read the entirety of the report, they were able to engage with the ambassadors, and so that took a different flavor and definitely allowed us to be more integrated and more comprehensive in our approach to the foreign policy and exercising and promoting the foreign policy of St. Kitts and Nevis. So I just wanted to answer that question, and I also wanted to agree with Ying Chu and the element of the importance of some of the issues that we cover, and the importance of understanding that there are some issues that are more delicate and more sensitive than others, and we have to always pay due respect to that reality. It is quite difficult to ascertain firmly that it's this, all of the meetings we should meet together, we should not meet together. And I think Maricela made a very good point. I mean, there are some things that came very naturally to us when it came to face-to-face meetings, because already all of your colleagues are going to be in the room, and so you already made that mental note of, hey, I'm going to meet this person during the coffee break. And now, I mean, as she said, we have to be more disciplined and organized to make an exerted and a more organized effort to arrange all of that. So that is also something I just wanted to echo. And finally, the issue of trust. I don't know how to feel. I don't think this is the note I should end on, but I feel my conclusion coming immediately after this. So I'll be as careful and as cautious as possible. When we had the initial interview, Dr. Katerina would recall that this was one of the most important elements that we had discussed, the issue of trust. And I want to thank Maricela, because I think she introduced the topic in her first intervention, and I thought it was excellently elaborated on. If we are going to be frank, the issue of trust, it takes some time to build. We have, of course, that very basic confidence in our colleagues that we understand sensitivity, the political sensitivities, and so there is the idea that we all have the same understanding of what is politically sensitive and how you can treat with politically sensitive information. The reality is that certainly what may be politically sensitive for my delegation may not be politically sensitive for the delegation of Costa Rica or Finland even. And so you have this very delicate, very fine line between how you approach these politically sensitive issues, especially using the technology. And I think I shared a very impactful example or experience in the last meeting that we had regarding a negotiation that I was in. I forget what the negotiation is now, but just to recap and to indicate that while we were in the negotiation, we approached one of the more politically sensitive issues. And I remember my colleague from another country reached out to me over WhatsApp. And of course, at that time, I'm still learning how to adjust. If you're with me in person, you can see my facial expression, you can see my hand gestures, you can read my body language and be able to interpret that I'm joking. Certainly, if you're making a WhatsApp call, and you're not seeing my face and you're only hearing my voice, which can be, sometimes my voice is a little bit crazy. It depends if it's early in the morning, of course, because I'm not a morning person. In any way, it wasn't well received. She did not interpret that I was joking, and so the issue the exchange got a bit tense. And I always promised that once we meet again, we would have a joke about it. But suffice to say that these are real issues. These are real challenges that we are confronted with. I mean, luckily for her and I, in that moment, we had already developed a friendship. And so we could have counted on that friendship to understand that we were not being too abrasive or too aggressive, but it happens. And this is the reality. And I think this is why most of our diplomats are eager to return to face-to-face interactions, because as we have said and as we have all concluded, nothing can replace that. And so trust is not just you trust that your colleagues won't record your meetings, but you also trust that the interaction will be received in good faith. And I think that that element we are still working on it. I mean, it's been 8 months, and practice makes perfect, but I think we're all a bit hesitant at some point. I think, and my advice to even my own self and to my colleagues would be, let's relax a little bit and know that in good faith we are all here to respect each other and to do the job that we're here to do. So that's it. And I mean, I feel encouraged by this meeting. I have to admit, since the closure of the third committee and also the sixth committee and a few other issues that I'm dealing with, I have had a chance to just relax. And I want to encourage us to take a moment to just relax. I know Mia is in New York. I'm not sure how relaxed we are here in New York. I think I don't know, but I would encourage us to relax, start doing a bit more activities with our families, and for those of us who are in isolation, try to manage a bit more and see what we can close out the year with. Thank you very much, colleagues. I am happy that I was able to share this hour with you, and I will hand over to you, Makta. Please forgive me for taking some of your time. Thank you.
Thank you. I think that's great advice, and I hope the audience will forgive us if we go a little bit over time, because I want to hand over to Makta.
I will not be long. When I hear people mentioning the issue of trust, two quotes come to my mind. One has done by Scott McNeely, who is the founder of Microsoft System. He said in 1999 that you have zero privacy anyway, so get over it. So, and in 2010, Mark Zuckerberg said to everybody that privacy is no longer a social norm. Now, the issue of trust in our setup, in a diplomatic setup, is how much we are trusting the platforms in which we are operating. That's probably one of the fundamental questions. Otherwise, we have moved from the analog, if I may say, physical analog world to the digital world, and we start addressing the issue of trust. Trust cliff we had many opportunities to have what we call the trust cliff. When the Snowden case had happened, for instance, when some countries were spying on other ones, in some of the leaders and so on, but life has continued and the business has continued and the world was actually continued to operate, and we continue to negotiate here and there. Even the same deals we have tried to destroy by lack of trust, such as, for instance, the Iran kind of nuclear kind of programs and so on. All those kind of things doesn't really, my point here is that trust is very important, but we should not be hunted by the fact that we need to have 100% trust. President Obama said you cannot, enjoy 100% the freedom and sovereignty, and also at the same time you wanted to have 100% security. Those don't go together. My take on that probably if we push too far in order to solve the issue of trust, specifically in the cyberspace, one of the things in our setup probably that we will be having diplomatic digital private platforms. And I will not be using that platform simply because it is manufactured in that corner of the world, or because it is owned by somebody whose name is coming from a specific area of the world that I don't like at a certain point of time. those things, probably if we had to push too much for them, then every Minister of Foreign Affairs would have to build their own digital platform and see how that digital platform can be bridged with the other digital platform in the other Minister of Foreign Affairs. So we'll probably have over 192 digital platforms working together and have them operating depending on how many bilateral relations we'll be having. So we just have to get over it, as McNeil said, and see how much we can continue the business safely and securely for the interest of the development of humanity, and make sure that we are moving forward efficiently. I will stop here because I could go on and on and on the matter, but I just want to stop here so we don't get bored too much. Over to you, Katerina.
Thank you. Thank you for this brilliant advice and final words to our speakers. It's been a pleasure listening to you and having you. So once again, thanks to Ms. Marisela Munoz, Ms. Asha de Sousa, and Mr. Mokhtar Jadali. Also, thank you to Ambassador Mia Reiner for her opening remarks. It's been an absolute pleasure. And also, very importantly, thanks to our audience. Thanks for your comments and questions, and thanks for being with us during this hour. With these web debates, we will be back in February. There are two quick resources that I wanted to share from the side of DiploFoundation. We have something called the ConfTag, and ConfTag is basically an overview of different video streaming platforms, different resources diplomats can use in case there is a need for help in decision-making which platform to use. And we also have a dedicated help desk to go more into detail on how to set up meetings, how to run these meetings. And my colleague Marco Lotti will put these resources in the chat so you can check them out. But I will also stop here and thank our speakers again, our audience, and basically wish everyone a wonderful December and a good holiday time, and hopefully some time to relax, as we heard. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Bye for now.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Take care.
Thank you, everyone.